It is me, Tyson the Trainer, back with another video for you. And today we're going to be talking about pre-workout nutrition. It is something that I have touched on a little bit ago, but I do want to, cover this again because sometimes our information gets lost. And if you guys haven't heard that previous video, or again, you might just want to refresh on this, I thought it would be a cool video to do today. So regarding pre-workout nutrition, it is quite a good idea to make sure as an athlete you are fueling your sessions, especially when it comes to the fat loss side of things, because when it comes to trying to lose body fat, we have to eat in a calorie deficit. First and foremost, got to eat in a calorie deficit. The issue with eating in a calorie deficit is that we try and think about where we're having our calories throughout the day and where we can save calories. Now this is good because we're being aware about where we can save calories, but it's bad if we're trying to save calories at the cost of limiting or reducing our overall performance levels. Because at the end of the day, if you cannot perform as well, that is not a good thing. Performance comes first and foremost when it comes to, you're obviously training for a specific event. You want to make sure performance is the most important thing. And while it can suffer while being in a deficit, we want to try and mitigate that as much as possible. Okay, so with that, the first most important thing you've got to consider is your intensity range with what you're going to be doing training wise. So whether you're doing one session a day, multiple sessions a day, training in the morning, training in the afternoon, you can base your nutrition around when you are training. All right, so for an example, if you're going to be training first thing in the morning, based on what that cardiovascular or weight training exercise is going to be, determines whether you should be fueling beforehand or not. All right, so if you're going to do something that's quite low intensity, now when we say low intensity, we have different ways we can obviously track this. If you have a heart rate monitor, it could be one of the best things you can do to track your overall intensity and heart rate. And if you're going less than about, I'd probably say 65% of your heart rate max. So for me, my heart rate max is about 190. So if I'm down in the 130 to 150 range, I'm going to primarily be using fat as a fuel source, which means I've got plenty of fat reserves here. I don't have to have carbohydrates pre-workout. But what I would want to have pre-workout is some caffeine, because caffeine will help with preventing neurological fatigue, okay, increasing your performance, and also mobilizing body fat, because with that it'll activate catecholamines. It won't activate catecholamines, sorry. It'll activate what's the word I'm trying to think of? Adrenaline at the end of the day, and it will mobilize fatty acids, which means basically we'll use fat as our fuel source. And so with that low intensity range, we would be not having to eat, having some caffeine, ideally black coffee or with a little bit of milk in it to keep that fasted zone. Not that fasted cardio is going to burn extra body fat, but to help you be fat adapted, firstly. Secondly, to help keep those calories low and either minimal to have them for later on throughout the day. And again, we can keep that intensity quite low between that, basically anywhere between up to 65% of your heart rate max is going to be a fine thing for you to do on an empty stomach. All right. So usually this would probably be like, your light jogs, light cardio, incline walking, whatever you're going to be doing, probably some skill work and stuff like that. Things that don't take up a lot of glycogen. All right. However, if it is more of a intense workout in the morning, or it's weight training that's using glycogen, then the best thing you could probably do, ideally, would be to have a little bit of carbohydrates and caffeine pre-workout first thing in the morning. Okay. Now, even this could be like literally one LCM bar or a piece of fruit with your coffee. Something very small, just enough carbohydrates to have in the bloodstream to be broken down by the liver to be used as immediate energy. Now, the cool thing is if you have carbohydrates the day before, especially at dinner, they're going to get stored regardless in your body. So which means you'll have muscle glycogen to use for the next day. So while it's not essential that you have carbohydrates pre-workout, they can benefit you if it's going to be something that uses more glycogen overall. Or again, your intensity is higher than that 65% of your heart rate max. So if it's light, don't need food, coffee's fine. If it's a little bit more intense, definitely want to make sure we have a little bit of carbohydrates. Again, an LCM bar, a little bit of cereal, piece of fruit, anything that's easy to digest, that's going to be, not sit in your stomach or anything like that, and that's going to help you with your performance. We don't want anything heavy. You don't want to have oats. You don't want to have wholemeal. You don't want to have whole grain. We want to avoid all of those things, especially when it's very close to your workout period. Like if you're waking up and you're training within the next 90 minutes, you want to have something that's easy to digest. And again, we choose heavy meals or like oats and stuff like that. They're going to be sitting in your stomach, not breaking down, and you're going to feel sluggish. Okay? Now, If your training is further throughout the day, let's say it's at lunchtime or at dinner time, based on where you are, what your hunger levels are at, and what type of training you're going to be doing, you can also obviously tailor your calories around those pre and post workout meals. People who are training in the afternoon probably have it best, as in you can't have as much caffeine because you don't want to obviously cause any issues to your sleep. And caffeine does have a half-life of 4 to 8 hours based on the person, so we want to make sure we're trying to avoid caffeine. But if you're able to have carbohydrates after your workout or before your workout, you're just going to be fuller in the evening too. Because I know a lot of people stress about, I want to have some calories left over for dinner time, so I feel good going to bed on a bit of a fuller stomach, and that's fine. So that's why people who train in the afternoon may have that little bit of extra benefit to use their carbohydrates pre and post workout. Okay, so if you are again training at midday, later on in the afternoon, whatever it's going to be, as long as you've had 1 to 2 decent sized meals before that and it's containing protein, fats, and carbohydrates, it's going to slowly break down in your body and you're going to have plenty of carbohydrate reserves for that workout. You don't have to have quick sources of carbohydrates, within 60 minutes of working out. If you've eaten, within 2 hours or 3 hours even, and it's been protein, carbs, and fats, or it's been low GI carbohydrates, so this is when you've had your oats. If let's say you're going to train at 10 a.m. and you've eaten at 6:45 in the morning, and it's basically you finish eating by 7:15, and in that meal you've had your protein oats. So you had protein, oats, and peanut butter. That's going to take ages to digest in your body. So you're going to be ready to rock and roll when that workout comes at 10 a.m. or whatever it's going to be. If the training is going to be at 1 p.m., and you've had 11 a.m. meal and it's chicken with, let's say, brown rice and veggies, very basic, or it's a chicken sandwich with whole meal chicken sandwich, again, those carbohydrates, those veggies, all those things are slowing down digestion. So fiber slows down digestion, protein slows down digestion, fat slows down digestion, the volume of food slows down digestion. And so with that, if you are taking a little bit longer towards when you first go to work out, the cool thing is it's going to be still breaking down. So this is why we don't need to be as diligent, thinking about our calories and stuff like that. As long as you've got a good meal, a mixed macro meal before your workouts, basically any time after that morning period, you're going to be sweet. Again, the only reason we want to make sure we have carbohydrates pre-workout in the morning is if it's going to be intense. So if you've covered that basis, you can basically mix your meals however you want. So that's the most important thing, just making sure we are having some type of carbohydrates. And that's the most important thing when it comes to dieting as an athlete, is not cutting your carbohydrates out, because carbohydrates are your fuel source. They are what's going to be driving intensity, and especially with you, if you are someone who is wanting to push that limit a little bit more and making sure you're keeping your performance up, reducing carbohydrates is the easiest way to shoot yourself in the foot at the end of the day. And a lot of people do it because they're like, they see the water weight drop off, and they see other people talking about how great it's been. Oh yeah, I've low carb. But as an athlete, you do not want to go on a low carb diet. Ideally, you want to keep your carbohydrates as high as possible for muscle recovery, right? For keeping your glycogen stores full, for training intensity overall, and actually carbohydrates have a stress lowering effect, and they're also anabolic, so muscle protectiveness too with carbohydrates, which is why we want to make sure primarily you are getting a good amount of carbohydrates in a day. Sorry, every day, I guess I should say. And so with that, our pre-workout timing, again, the only time it really is going to be of concern of getting those quick carbohydrates in is first thing in the morning. And then when it comes to post-workout training, it's really based on what you've been doing, how far away you've eaten your last meal. So if you have had a quick source of carbohydrates in the morning, first thing, you definitely want to get in protein as soon as possible after your training session. Ideally, the sooner, the better. Just because you are now, in a negative protein balance, I guess you would say, or you've broken down some muscle, and because you haven't had protein since the day before, you want to make sure you get protein in, because otherwise you're going to lose a little bit of muscle mass. So that would be ideal to have protein immediately post-workout. You've probably heard of the anabolic window before. It is much longer than 24 hours, but it's much longer than 90 minutes. It's actually longer than 24 hours. But again, if you are someone who hasn't had protein that day yet, getting protein in post-workout is going to be essential, okay? Essential, right? Any other time of the day, again, as long as you're eating, based on when your last meal was. So if you've eaten at, let's say, 10 a.m., you trained at 12 p.m., it's now 1:30 p.m., well, that's like 3.5 hours. So ideally, within the next hour, you want to make sure you are getting another meal in regardless, okay? because every 3 to 4 hours we want to be activating muscle protein synthesis and getting a decent chunk of protein in. So if every 3 to 4 hours you're getting a meal in, and no matter how close that is to the workout, you're going to be sweet. If you ate, a meal, let's say an hour before a workout, or even 40 minutes, and it was a protein shake and something quick, then you had a workout, you could probably wait, 90 to 120 minutes before you get it in. But also the question is like, why would you wait, right? So it's not about trying to get it in as fast as possible and every minute you miss, you're missing gains, because that's not the case. But in saying that, ideally, if whenever you can get protein in and a meal in after a workout, it would be ideal. Okay, and the size of the meal is really going to depend based on how many calories you have for the day and what your hunger level is like. Okay, so pardon me, if you're doing 2 training sessions a day, ideally you want to get quick carbohydrates in straight after your workout. The reason for this is because when you're doing 2 sessions a day, you're going to need to replenish that muscle glycogen for that next session. But if you're not doing 2 sessions a day, then having carbohydrates throughout the day is going to replenish that muscle glycogen, and it's not as important to get it in post-workout. So even if you got a quick protein hit after your workout, carbs are not essential. But again, it's really going to be based on your hunger and the amount of calories you have and how you want to figure that out. Because the biggest thing we need to focus on is adherence. If you're to be adherent, if you're able to get all the food you need to get in, that's the most important thing. And if for you want to make sure you're getting protein in after a workout, but you're not too hungry and you want to save some calories for later, then that's absolutely fine. For me, post-workout, I usually have like 100 grams of rice, if that, with some chicken, or very basic, or I have an LCM bar with a protein shake, because my appetite's quite low after a workout. So I get enough protein in, which is about 40 grams for me, and then I just make sure I get a little bit of carbohydrates in, just because I want something. Again, carbohydrates aren't essential, but it's my little habit that I like to do, and then I'm good to go for the rest of the day, right? And then I'll wait for later on in the day when I'm actually, my appetite's more increased. Usually after 4 p.m. is when I start to notice that my hunger levels are kind of getting up there, and that's when I'll make sure that I am feeding myself and, getting all the nutrients that I need in for the day. And just all those extra calories too. I tend to eat less during the day because of my hunger levels. My performance is still going well because I have pre-workout nutrition and post-workout nutrition. So for my pre-workout, it literally is 1 LCM bar with a skim cappuccino. So, it's like 40 grams of carbs. No, it's not, it's like 30 grams of carbs. But I'm not using a lot with my workouts. You guys may train harder than me, so you may need extra carbohydrates, but you don't need a ridiculous amount either. And then post-workout, again, like for me, very simple, a protein shake or some chicken and rice. So between my pre and post, it's like, 700 calories, if that. And I'm dieting on 3,000 calories. So I've got a lot of extra calories for later on in the day. Again, I don't hoard my calories. I just base it for that second part of the day. So after 3 p.m. is when I'm going to be consuming more meals. And my training's always done by 3 p.m. because I'm only training once a day. So the biggest thing, remember, adherence is key. So making sure you find something you can adhere to. Secondly, making sure that if you're going to train first thing in the morning, get some quick sources of carbohydrates in. Cereal, LCM bars, piece of fruit, a little bit of caffeine is going to help you. If the intensity is low, you can do it without carbohydrates and you can just have some caffeine and power through. Remember, it's based on your heart rate. And then after a workout, if it's been in the morning again and you haven't eaten anything, get protein in after. If you've had just carbohydrates pre-workout, get protein in after. If it's been any other time of the day, as long as you get some protein in after still, that's what's going to help you out. So don't obsess too much about specific ratios or getting that in. Ideally, spreading your protein out over the meals you have. So if you need double your body weight in protein and you have 4 meals a day, spread your protein out evenly. It's going to be fine. You don't need a 2-to-1 carbohydrate ratio or any of that bullshit. We just want to make sure that you're being adherent at the end of the day and getting those nutrients in. So that's your little pre and post workout tips for dieting. If you guys have any questions, make sure to send me a message on Instagram at Tyson the Trainer with 2 R's. And if anyone is looking for nutrition coaching or if anyone's looking for help with their sport, you can also send me a message on Instagram and we can chat more. Till next time, guys, speak to you then.